Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshak if you want to call me by my in-game name. And just a recent announcement from Blizzard, we actually have some balance changes coming to the game, which is really surprising because after the release of most expansions, they don't really like touching the game for a couple months. We've seen that with the Pirate Warrior meta, we've seen it with the mid-range Shaman meta, we even saw it with the Undertaker meta. So with that, it's really interesting and really good that they're actually going in here and changing a few of the problem cards that have seemed to have arisen since, again, the release of the Knights of the Frozen Throne, and we'll get into it now. So with that, the cards that were affected are Innervate, Fiery War Axe, Hex, Murloc, War Leader, and Spreading Plague. So we'll go over each card, discuss the kind of the deck that it's in, and how I think the decks are going to be affected by this change. Overall, I believe that these changes were good, besides one of them. You can kind of guess which one you think I do not like, due to the fact that I happen to be a very hardcore warrior lover. So with that, the first card that we knew it was coming was Innervate. So many people have complained about this card almost since alpha. No, I wouldn't say alpha, but like since this Nax was released. Innervate has always been a problem card due to the fact that it gives Druid the ability to kind of cheat out its mana and accelerate how fast they can summon giant minions. So it never feels good when it's turn 1 or 2 on your side of the board. Your opponent goes coin, Innervate, giant minion. So they summon this, 8/8, 7/7, whatever the case may be, and it's only your turn 2 or 3, and you have no ability, no way to deal with it. And then from there, you just get beat down by your opponent cheating the mana, and you just can't do anything. So I believe that is why the Innervate has been nerfed, and the nerf to it, it went from 0 mana, gain 2 mana crystals, to 0 mana, gain 1 mana crystal. So basically it's a counterfeit coin. And as we know, Rogue is probably the class that benefits most from spells like this, 0 mana cost spells that either give you mana or generate some tempo on board, like Backstab, right? So currently Innervate is found in almost every single Druid. It's found in Aggro Druid, it's found in Taunt Druid, it's found in Control Druid, Ramp Druid, Jade Druid. So with this change, it basically forces the card to fit into a specific Druid class that would run Auctioneer, or maybe like a spell heavy Druid deck, which actually makes it a lot better, because if you've mentioned it, or if you've seen any of my previous videos, I hate cards that fit into every single archetype of every single particular class that it fits in. So you have like Innervate that fit in every single warrior or every single Druid deck. That spot is never going to be, it's never going to open up to any new card, because Innervate's just too good. You cannot replace the card. It's a staple. So every time you build Druid, you include it. Now when you build Druid, you don't need Innervate for that staple spot, which allows you the flexibility to add new cards that of course come with new sets. And that was one of the major problems with cards like Innervate, cards like Swipe, is that there's no flexibility with the card, because you have to include it in your deck, or your deck is just less superior to the other decks but if they do have it and you do not. So seeing this nerf to Innervate obviously is gonna reduce the power level of Druid. I believe with these changes, I don't think Druid is going to be as popular as it is on ladder right now, because when people normally see cards being reduced in power level, they tend to sway away from those and then go to like the second most powerful deck, which was also affected by this change. But I don't think the effect of this change hurt the second most powerful deck as hard as it did for Druid. So we may actually see a lot more Paladins on ladder, which we'll get to in a second. So Innervate, good change. They basically did what they needed to do to the card. They also mentioned other changes they were going to make, like refresh 2 mana crystals, gain 2 mana crystals this turn and increase mana to 1, or gain 6 mana crystals this turn and increase the mana cost to 4. So these were quite interesting changes. This was kind of like the most flexible change, because again it has 0 mana cost. So when you play this card, there's no requirement. You can play it on turn 1, you can play it on turn 10, and it's always going to do the same thing. Meanwhile, like gain 6 mana crystals, this costs 4. Obviously on turn 10 the card's going to suck, but on turn 10 this card obviously isn't as good as it is on turn 1 or 2, but it's still better than this one would be. So the next one we're going to go over is Fiery War Axe. This one's really sad for me. Warrior has always been one of my favorite decks for a long time now. So this is just sad. So it's a bad eagle horn bow It's a bad rallying blade, which are the weapons of the same cost that actually have another ability tagged onto them. I mean, I kind of understand why they changed Fiery War Axe. It meets the same kind of criteria that I mentioned before with Innervate, that it's an auto include. You know, most of the time, every single warrior deck is always going to play Fiery War Axe, which hurts the 2-mana slot, and also hurts like most other decks can't hold a 2-mana 3/2 weapon. It's going to kill anything they play regardless. Like, it's, you know, Mana Worm, Sorcerer's Apprentice. If you're playing against Mage, it destroys them. It's just a ball full of damage. And then also in Pirate Warrior, it's very powerful due to the fact that it's a very cheap, very powerful weapon. So a lot of times if you play against Pirate Warrior, they're able to upgrade just this particular weapon throughout the entire game, where they're still swinging with the Fiery War Axe on turn 4, 5, or 6, and this thing has gone up to 5 or 6 attack. I'm sure we've all been in that situation before. So the nerf onto this makes sense. It's just not, I'm not happy about it due to the fact that, again, it's just so much worse now. 3-mana 3/2 weapon with no, like, if they were to give this ability that did something with where, like, if you have, I don't, like, a 3-mana 3/2, if you have 5 armor, gain another durability, or if you have 10 armor, gain another durability. Like, give me something, man. Don't make it a make it a shitty Eagle Horn Bow or a shitty Rallying Blade, because we've all, like, ugh. Like, now it's also just a bad King's Defender. King's Defender is the same thing as this, but it also says if you have taunt minions, gain durability for that. So I don't know why, like, they just basically neutered the War Axe, which is sad. This hurts warriors a lot more than you'd think, because warriors rely on this early game, especially control warriors. So very sad, very sad. Moving to Hex, this is actually an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people saw this particular change happening whatsoever. Like, I don't think anybody, if you would have asked people what top 5 cards do you think are going to get nerfed, I don't think this card would have been on anybody's list. Maybe one person that was like left field and then could see the future through some, like, fucking dreidel or something. But this is a card that, it has the same effect as Polymorph, but it's actually, I think, a little bit better, and it costs 1 mana cheaper. So basically, they put this on par of a Polymorph and a Mage, which also costs 4 mana, but the Polymorph brings it to a 1/1 sheep, while this turns it into a 0/1 frog with taunt. So some could argue that a 0/1 taunt with frog is, or a 0/1 taunt frog is better than a 1/1 sheep, and vice versa. But this is like a really flexible CC spell, like the 3 mana to get rid of whatever the fuck you want, and it's not even like destroy the minion, you actually transform it. So if it has a death rattle, it doesn't trigger. If you're playing against an Azoth deck and you transform, you know, their Tyrion or a death rattle that you don't like into the frog, they actually cannot bring that card back with N'Zoth anymore, which is why transform effects were so popular when, you know, the old god decks, N'Zoth decks, and death rattle decks were, you know, in the meta, was because of transform effects. So that's really what makes this card really good. So changing it from 3 to 4 mana makes sense. It is a slight nerf to the card, but I don't think it's a make or break. I think control decks that run Hex will still run Hex regardless of being at 4 mana or not. And it's like the execute nerf for warrior. Instead of execute costing 1 mana, it costs 2. You know, you're still seeing double execute in all the warrior decks. It just makes it slightly more annoying. I think the same goes for the Hex. So interesting card. I didn't really see them touching this one for now, maybe later, but it's interesting that they would touch on it now in preparation for future cards or whatnot. They didn't really mention too much here other than that the class just has too much flexibility right now as Shaman. All right, so this is the second, I think, biggest one. We hit on Innervate, which was huge. It's probably the biggest nerf yet, and it's going to affect Druids highly. And this is the second one, is the Murloc War Leader, the nerf that they did to this. So instead of it giving all of your other Murlocs +2 attack and +1 health, it now only gives Murlocs +2 attack. And while that may seem, well, Rob, the problem is Murlocs swinging you in the face every turn, and they're gonna kill you by turn 4 or 5. That's the real problem. Why didn't they make it, you know, give your Murlocs +1/+1? The reason being is that the health actually means a lot more than not, because when you have a Murloc War Leader and you trade into a minion and the minion were to die, or the Murloc War Leader leaves the battlefield, the health actually remains the same. So even if you damaged a minion and then they played Murloc War Leader, it actually gives it +1 health even after the Murloc War Leader dies, because it doesn't reduce down to what it was prior to taking damage before you played the War Leader. So sorry if that was really confusing. If you played against War Leader, you know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, just understand that +1 health is a big deal and it's bad. So this buff, or this nerf, actually hurts it, not as much as, like I said, the Innervate, but it still hurts it a decent amount. And will this stop Murloc Paladin from being played? Not really. I still think it's going to be a pretty popular deck, even with this particular change. Trying to think if anything else pops to mind. They mentioned that they were thinking about nerfing the Rockpool Hunter as well. But the thing is, the Rockpool Hunter is eventually rotating out, and also Murloc Paladin, you know, depending on if they print more cards for it, if it will continue to stay like a top tier deck in the meta. But cards like Murloc War Leader are part of the basic set, so this card's actually going to be around forever. So I think them tackling this card first is best, and then if it continues to be a problem, then tackle another card that is eventually going to be cycling out. But they also have to pay attention to Wild, right? So it's also one of those things. 69 viewers, A. Lamau. And for those of you watching this, I'm actually streaming on Twitch right now. So this is our first video we've ever done on YouTube in regards to like news and information, but also doing it live on Twitch. So the Twitch audience gets a little first look-see. A little peek inside the book to explore the reading rainbow, you know what I'm saying? All right, so Spreading Plague is another really big problem card in Druid right now. So Druid has always been known for its issue with dealing with a board that extends very wide, which means that your opponent plays a lot of like mid to large creatures very quickly. And Druid doesn't have efficient spells or efficient minions to be able to deal with that. So what did they do? They gave Druid a card that deals with wide boards. So Spreading Plague basically said for every minion your opponent has over you, you get to summon a 1/5 Scarab with Taunt, which is good because not only do they have high HP, they have Taunt. There's now Taunt synergies within Druid if you're playing the card that buffs all your taunts by 2/2, but that's regardless. So a 5 mana, fill up your board with a huge taunt minions is quite annoying, and it gave Druid an upper edge versus any sort of aggro deck. I mean, if you look at Hunter, look at Unleash the Hounds, or you look at Warrior, and you have it's not Protect the King, but it's a 3 mana, generate a 1/1 taunt for all your opponent's minions. I mean, those cards don't even compare to this card, and they cost 2 mana short at that time. Now it's 3 mana, but this card was just insane for the value. You know, you're playing against a shaman, and they have 3 totems on board that all have no attack, and then you're summoning a 5 mana 3/15 taunt creature for free. Like, well, not for free, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't actually cost you a minion. You get to summon 3 minions. That's huge. So them nerfing this card to 6 mana is going to hurt their aggro matchup, which is what Druid has always been weak to. You know, Druid has to be weak to something. When a deck is really good at late game and it can go infinite, they need to be weak to what? Obviously, it's not going to be control decks because they can outvalue them. So they need to be weak to mid-range. Fast mid-range decks are like aggro decks. Because a deck that just can beat everything, that's what dominates the meta, and that's what we're seeing now. Jade Druid can beat aggro, it can beat mid-range, and it can beat control. So there's no really true counter to the deck right now, and Spreading Plague was part of that problem because, again, aggro decks weren't able to do what they're supposed to do, and that's fill up the board with little minions, or resilient small minions, and go face. And now that Spreading Plague costs 1 more, Innervate costs, you know, it gives you 1 less mana. We're going to see less Spreading Plague. We're going to see less ramp. We're going to see less infestation on turn 5 or 6. It's going to be good. So good change. I don't know how bad this is going to impact Spreading Plague. Obviously, I'm still going to play 2 of them in like my big Druid just because, you know, regardless of playing this on turn 5 or 6, filling up my board with 1/5 taunts is pretty nice, even if it's only on 2 or 3 creatures. So I think I'm still going to play this card. Plus, it's a slight buff. If we think of this as a positive note for all of you Druid players out there, like, oh my God, what am I going to get to Legend with? They're nerfing me. They're nerfing me. Don't you worry, play Medivh in your deck, and now Spreading Plague gets you a 6 mana creature instead of a 5 mana creature. You got to think of the positives here, guys. So now it's going to summon the 6 mana 1/1 for you instead of like a good 5 mana card. Powerful. All right, so to wrap things up, they also mentioned that there was a couple other key cards that they were taking a look at, but they wanted to target the ones we just discussed first, and that's going to be the Ultimate Infestation and the Ice Block. These are on their radar. Ice Block has been a problem child for a long time now due to the fact that it extends the life of a mage past what it's normally going to live, and then they also can generate more of these through cards like Primordial Glyph and Kabbalist Tome. So this is a card that, from what they've said here, it actually looks like they're just waiting to the beginning of the year for the next rotation to actually cycle this card into the Hall of Fame. From what I've read here, you know, it's not confirmed that they're going to do that, but from the way they've toned their message, they just don't want to cycle out a card into Hall of Fame in the middle of the year. They want to wait till their actual cycle starts and then cycle the card. And then Ultimate Infestation, they said, actually isn't the problem. It was Innervate and Spreading Plague that was a problem. So we'll see if that's the case. You know, I'm not going to contradict them. and say Ultimate Infestation was the ultimate problem, because this is what I think. They actually have, you know, all the numbers and all the games to back it up, and hopefully they've made the right choice, because, you know, they're a multi-billion-dollar company that I can assume can make a rational decision on a children's card game. So with that, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to input your own response into this video, I'd love to hear it. In regards to anything we've gone over, hopefully we can get a good comment section going. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Of course, I'm Robert Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.